Welcome, chosen one. Sit down for this one, because it's not loud, it's not dramatic, and that's exactly the point. There was a room, there was a plan, there was a version of you they had already written the ending for. And in that ending, you were supposed to break. You were supposed to raise your voice, defend yourself, spiral, panic, give them something to point at and say, "See, we told you." That was the whole plan. That was the entire architecture. And you walked in, heard what they wanted you to hear, felt what they wanted you to feel, and then you did the one thing their plan never accounted for. You smiled, not a smirk, not a performance, just a real, quiet, unshaken smile. And chosen one, that smile did more damage in 3 seconds than any argument could have done in 3 hours. Because their plan needed a reaction from you, the way a fire needs oxygen. And you just took the air out of the room. They don't know yet why it actually collapsed. They think it was bad timing. They think it was bad luck. They think maybe you didn't understand what was happening. Oh, you understood. You understood better than anyone in that room. And that's the part they still haven't figured out. Before we go further, pay this message back into the universe the way it's meant to be paid. Hit like, subscribe, and let this signal travel to the next person who needs to hear that their calm was never weakness. It was always the weapon nobody could see coming. Let's talk about the pain underneath this for a second, because you know it already. You know what it feels like to be underestimated on purpose, to be handed a script where your only role is to fall apart. People have done this to you before. Long before that room, long before that moment, someone somewhere decided that the fastest way to win against you was to make you react. Because reactions can be recorded, reactions can be used, reactions can be twisted into proof that you were always the problem. So they built entire strategies around provoking you, poking you, testing you, waiting for the crack. And for a long time, maybe you gave them something. Maybe you flinched once. Maybe you raised your voice once. And they filed that away like evidence, waiting to use it again. But something in you changed, quietly, without asking permission. You stopped needing to prove you weren't what they said. You stopped needing the room to see your side. You just started watching instead of reacting. And chosen one, that shift is the whole story tonight. Because the moment you stopped performing your innocence is the exact moment their plan stopped working. Think about how much energy performing innocence actually costs a person. Every time you explain yourself to someone who has already decided not to believe you, you're spending fuel on an audience that was never going to change its mind. That's exhausting, in a way that's hard to describe to anyone who hasn't lived it. The specific tiredness of defending something that never should have needed defending in the first place. At some point, you simply ran out of interest in paying that cost. Not because you stopped caring what was true, because you stopped needing everyone else in the room to agree on it before you could feel settled in yourself. If you feel that pull right now, that recognition settling into your chest, drop 77 in the comments. Not for luck, as a marker. A signal that says you know exactly what room I'm talking about, and you're ready to understand what actually happened in it. Now let's go back to that moment, chapter by chapter, and take apart exactly what your calm did to the people who were counting on your chaos. Number 1, the plan that needed you to lose it. Let's be honest about what was actually built before you ever walked into that room. It wasn't built to convince anyone of the truth. It was built to convince everyone of a reaction. Somebody sat somewhere, maybe more than one somebody, and decided the fastest way to make you look wrong was to make you look emotional. They didn't need facts on their side. Facts are slow. Facts require patience. Facts have to be checked. What they needed was a moment, a clip, a memory they could pass around afterward that said, "See how they got? See how defensive they were? See how they couldn't handle it?" That was the entire design. Not truth, theater. And chosen one, theater only works if the other person plays their part. Every trap like this depends on a script with two roles, the instigator and the reactor. They already knew their lines. They'd rehearsed them, maybe literally, maybe just in their head, a dozen times before they ever said them out loud. What they didn't rehearse, what they couldn't rehearse, was a version of you who simply didn't pick up your line. Imagine a stage built for two actors, and one of them just doesn't show up in character. The other one is left standing there, holding a script that makes no sense without a scene partner. That's what happened in that room. They said the line that was supposed to make you crack, and you just looked at them, calm, present, unbothered, and the silence that followed wasn't awkward for you. It was fatal for them. Here's the question you might be asking yourself even now. Why did it feel so easy in that moment, when it used to feel so hard? Because you'd already done the work before you walked in. You'd already stopped needing them to understand you. You'd already accepted that some people will misread you no matter what you do, so there was nothing left to defend. And a person with nothing left to defend cannot be baited the way a person still fighting for approval can be baited. That's the difference. That's the whole difference. They expected panic. They got peace. And peace, chosen one, doesn't perform. It just sits there, undeniable, and makes everyone else's performance look exactly like what it was. Think about how much preparation goes into a plan like that before it ever reaches a room. Somebody had to decide what to say. Somebody had to decide when to say it. Somebody had to time it around a moment when you'd be tired, or distracted, or caught slightly off guard. Because timing is everything when the entire strategy depends on catching you before your guard is fully up. That's not a small amount of effort. That's calculation. That's a person or a group of people spending real time thinking about how to make you look like the problem. And all of that calculation, all of that rehearsal, all of that patience on their end was spent preparing for a version of you that simply wasn't in that room anymore. That's the part worth sitting with. It wasn't that their plan was poorly built. In some ways, it might have even been clever, well-timed, well-rehearsed. The failure wasn't in the construction. The failure was in the target. They built a key for a lock that had already been changed, and no amount of turning that key harder was ever going to open a door that wasn't there anymore. Number 2. The second the room changed temperature. You've felt it before. That shift in a room when something invisible moves. Nobody says it out loud, nobody points at it, but everyone feels the air get heavier or lighter, depending on what just happened. In that moment, when you didn't give them the reaction they were counting on, the temperature in that room dropped like someone had opened a door to outside in the middle of winter. Think about what that must have felt like from their side. They built momentum. They'd built a rhythm designed to carry the room toward a specific outcome. Every plan like that depends on speed, on keeping you off balance long enough that you don't have time to think, only time to react. And you broke the rhythm without even trying to break it. You just didn't move at the pace they needed you to move at. Picture a group pushing hard against a door they expect to be locked, throwing their whole weight into it, only for the door to have been open the entire time. There's no crash, no triumph, no sound at all. Just a strange, disorienting silence as they stumble forward into a room they weren't ready to actually be in. That's what your calm did. It removed the resistance they were counting on to make their push look powerful. You might wonder why people in that room went quiet after, why eyes dropped to the table, why nobody quite knew where to look. It's because the plan had a next step, and the next step required you to be somewhere you weren't. It required you to be defensive, loud, wounded. Instead, you were simply there, present, still smiling slightly, like someone watching a storm that had already passed them by without touching them. That temperature change didn't fade quickly either. People remembered how that room felt long after the conversation moved on to something else. Because a shift like that doesn't just pass. It leaves a mark on everyone who felt it happen, whether they understood why or not. There's a particular kind of quiet that only shows up when a plan dies in front of witnesses. It's different from an ordinary pause in conversation. It has weight to it. You could probably close your eyes right now and remember the exact texture of that silence. The way nobody quite knew whether to keep pushing or change the subject. The way somebody eventually cleared their throat just to have something to do with the moment. That's the sound of a script running out of pages in real time. And here's what most people never think about in the middle of a moment like that. Silence doesn't just fail to help the person trying to provoke you. It actively works against them, because it gives everyone else in the room time to think instead of react. The plan depended on speed, on carrying the room's emotional temperature somewhere specific before anyone had a chance to examine it too closely. Your stillness gave the room exactly what the plan could not survive. Time to notice what was actually happening instead of simply being swept along by it. Number 3. Why they mistook your quiet for something breakable. Here's a truth almost nobody says clearly enough. People who plan around your reaction have almost always misjudged your quiet before. They've seen you go still in past moments and mistaken that stillness for hesitation, for weakness, for someone who simply hadn't found their footing yet. That misjudgment is the seed of everything that happened in that room, because it convinced them your calm was fragile, temporary, one hard push away from cracking wide open. That's the mistake almost every plan like theirs makes. They read your silence the way they'd read their own silence, and assume it means the same thing. For them, quiet might mean holding something in until it explodes later. So they expect that from you too. They expect a delay, a slow burn, an eventual eruption they can point to and say, there it is. There's the truth of who they really are. What they never accounted for is that your quiet isn't a held breath, it's a settled one. Imagine someone poking at what looks like a thin sheet of ice, certain it will crack under a little pressure, never realizing the water beneath froze solid months ago. They keep pressing, waiting for the give, and the ice just holds, cold and steady, refusing to perform the collapse they were promised. That's the kind of quiet you walked in with, not fragile, set. You might ask yourself why it took them so long to understand this about you. Because understanding it would have meant admitting their entire strategy was built on an outdated version of you, a version from a year ago, or 5 years ago, or a version they invented because it was easier to fight than the real one. People rarely update their picture of someone once they've decided who that person is. So they walked into that room still fighting a person who didn't exist anymore, and lost to the one who actually showed up. This is worth naming clearly, because it applies far beyond that one moment. Most people build their expectations of you out of the loudest version of your past, the version that existed during your hardest years, the version still catching up to itself, still learning where its own edges were. That version was real once. It doesn't mean it's who they walked in expecting to meet, is who actually opened the door. People rarely do the work of updating a file once they've closed it, especially when the closed version is easier to argue with than the current one. Think of someone studying an old map, trusting every road on it completely, never noticing that the terrain shifted years ago. They walk in confident, following directions that no longer exist, and wonder why nothing lines up the way it should. That confusion isn't your problem to solve for them. It's simply the cost of relying on an old map instead of asking where the roads actually go now. You didn't owe them an updated version of yourself in advance. You just showed up as who you'd already become and let the mismatch speak for itself. Number 4. The moment their voices started doing the talking for them. Here's something worth noticing if you go back through that memory. It wasn't just your calm that told the story. It was the way their voices changed the second they realized you weren't reacting the way they needed you to. A voice that starts strong, certain, rehearsed, and slowly loses its footing the longer it goes unanswered by the expected response. That's not confidence anymore. That's improvisation. And people who are improvising under pressure almost always start to over-explain. You might have noticed it happening in real time. The point they were making got repeated, then repeated again with slightly different words, like they were trying to find the version that would finally land the way it was supposed to. That repetition wasn't strength, it was a search for the reaction that never came. And every time they searched and came up empty, their own voice betrayed a little more uncertainty. Picture someone trying to light a match in the wind, striking it again and again, each strike a little more frantic than the last, refusing to admit the wind simply isn't going to allow that flame tonight. That's what talking louder into your silence looked like. Not power. Persistence without result, which from the outside looks a lot like desperation. Why does silence do this to people? Because most confrontations are built like a duet, one voice rising to meet the other, each side feeding energy into the exchange. When you don't feed it, the other voice has nowhere left to go except further into itself, repeating, justifying, sometimes even contradicting its own earlier points without realizing it. You didn't have to point that out. The room heard it happen on its own. There's something almost merciful about not having to say anything in a moment like that. You didn't need to point out the repetition. You didn't need to call attention to the way their argument kept circling back on itself, kept restating the same accusation with slightly different wording, hoping one version of it would finally land the way the first one was supposed to. Silence let the moment expose itself without you spending a single ounce of your own energy on the exposing. Consider how much harder that moment would have been for you if you'd tried to argue back point for point. You'd have been pulled into their rhythm, matching their pace, spending your own breath, defending things that never needed defending in the first place. Instead, you let their words do what over-explained words always do. Eventually, they wear themselves thin. A rope pulled taut long enough starts fraying on its own without anyone needing to cut it. That's what happened to every point they tried to make. You didn't cut the rope. You just waited long enough for it to fray under its own weight. Number 5. Why the people watching started studying you instead of them. It's a small detail, easy to miss if you're the one standing in the middle of it, but it matters enormously. At some point in that room, the attention shifted. It stopped following the person who was speaking and started following you instead, the one who wasn't. That's not typical. In most confrontations, eyes follow noise. Noise draws attention the way movement draws a predator's eye. But your stillness became the more interesting thing in the room, and that alone tells you something about what actually happened. People in that room, even the ones who said nothing, were quietly recalibrating what they thought they knew about you. Every version of you they'd been told about, every rumor, every warning, every "watch out, they'll react badly," was being tested in real time against what they were actually seeing. And what they were seeing didn't match the file they'd been handed. Imagine a courtroom where the accused is expected to break down on the stand, and instead answers every question with the same even tone, the same steady eyes, no defensiveness at all. The jury doesn't watch the prosecutor anymore. They watch the person everyone told them to distrust, because the story they were promised and the person in front of them stopped matching up. That mismatch is where doubt starts. Not doubt in you, doubt in the story they were handed about you. You might wonder why people who barely know you would even care enough to notice. Because rooms remember composure. Long after the specific argument fades, people remember who stayed steady and who didn't. And that memory becomes its own kind of reputation, one you never had to ask for, and one that's much harder to argue with than any rumor. It's worth asking yourself honestly what it actually takes to earn that kind of attention without asking for it. It isn't charisma, it isn't volume, it isn't even confidence in the way people usually mean the word, the loud, performative kind that fills a room before anyone's even spoken. What earns that kind of attention is consistency between what someone expects to see and what they actually see, or in your case, the total absence of that consistency. People notice mismatches. They can't help it. It's how attention works. And you became the biggest mismatch in that room the second you didn't play the part you were assigned. Picture a room full of people all trained to watch the loudest voice, the way eyes in a crowd instinctively follow the person shouting. Now picture that same room slowly, quietly, turning to watch the one person who isn't shouting at all, simply because that person is the only thing happening that nobody predicted. That reallocation of attention isn't something you can manufacture on purpose. It only happens when the real thing shows up instead of the expected performance. And rooms can always tell the difference, even when they can't explain it out loud. Number 6. Stay with me here, because this is where it gets personal for them. Up to this point, everything that happened in that room was still deniable to them. They could tell themselves it was a bad day, bad timing, an unlucky moment that didn't go their way. But what happens after the room empties, after the meeting ends, after everyone goes back to their normal lives? That's the part they can't explain away so easily. Because the version of the story that gets replayed afterward isn't the one they wrote. It's the one that actually happened. Somewhere later that day, or that night, or a few days after, one of them thinks about it again. Not because they want to, because they can't stop themselves. They replay the moment they expected you to fold, and they feel that same strange discomfort return. The discomfort of realizing they misjudged something badly, and there's no version of events where that misjudgment doesn't matter. Picture someone lying awake, running the same 5 minutes on a loop, trying to find the point where it should have worked, and coming up with nothing except the plain, uncomfortable fact that it simply didn't. No twist, no excuse, no alternate explanation, just a plan that met a person who wasn't playing along and lost. This is the part where their frustration stops being about you specifically and starts being about themselves. Because now they have to explain, at least to themselves, why someone they were so sure would break didn't. And there's no comfortable answer to that question. Every answer leads back to the same place. They underestimated you, and they know it now in a way they can't unknow. This is the part of the story that has nothing to do with you anymore, and everything to do with what they now have to carry. You didn't assign them that discomfort. You didn't design it as punishment. It's simply the natural consequence of building a plan around a prediction and watching that prediction fail in front of an audience. Nobody enjoys realizing they misjudged someone that badly, and there's no version of quietly processing that realization that doesn't sting a little every time it resurfaces. Think about how differently this plays out compared to if you had reacted the way they wanted. If you'd broken down, if you'd gotten loud, if you'd given them the moment they were fishing for, they'd have a clean, comfortable story to tell themselves afterward, one where they were right all along and you simply confirmed it. Instead, they're left holding a story with no comfortable ending, a story where the only consistent detail is that their read on you failed, publicly, with no do-over available. That's a harder thing to carry than any argument you could have made back at them in the moment. And there's no shortcut around that discomfort for them either. They can't rewrite what the room witnessed. They can't quietly edit the memory of everyone who was there to see how it actually went. The only thing they can do is sit with it, turn it over, and eventually decide whether they'll adjust how they approach you going forward, or simply avoid testing that theory again. Either way, the decision is theirs to make now, not yours to manage. Number 7. The version of you they'll be quietly warning each other about. Here's what tends to happen after a moment like this one, whether anyone admits it out loud or not. The people who witnessed it start talking to each other in smaller, quieter conversations, the kind that don't happen in the main room, but happen afterward, in hallways, in messages, in the spaces where people say the true version of what they actually think. And in those conversations, chosen one, your name starts to carry a different weight than it used to. It's not praise exactly, it's caution. The kind of caution people extend to something they don't fully understand yet, but have learned not to underestimate twice. You'll notice it in small ways. People choosing their words more carefully around you. People pausing slightly before they bring something up. People who used to speak first, now waiting to see what you'll say, if you'll say anything at all. Think of a fence line that used to be casually crossed by anyone who wanted to, until one day someone crosses it and realizes there's something on the other side that doesn't scare easily. After that, the fence doesn't need a sign. People just start walking around it without needing to be told why. You might ask why this matters to you at all, since you never asked for a reputation, never asked to be talked about, never wanted to be the subject of anyone's hallway conversation. It matters because it changes what people attempt around you going forward. The plans built to provoke a reaction from you become rarer, not because people suddenly respect you more out of kindness, but because word travels that the old plan doesn't work anymore. And a plan that doesn't work stops getting used. There's a quiet kind of relief that comes from this, even if nobody ever tells you about it directly. Every plan that doesn't get attempted because someone decided it wouldn't work on you is a plan you never had to survive in the first place. You'll never see the version of events where someone almost tried something and thought better of it because your reputation for staying steady got there before they did. That's not a small thing. That's an entire category of conflict that quietly disappears from your future, not because you fought it off, but because word got around that fighting it wasn't worth the attempt. Imagine a river that used to be crossed carelessly by anyone in a hurry, until the day someone tried to cross it during a flood and barely made it out. After that, people start walking further out of their way to find a bridge instead. Not because anyone posted a warning sign, but because the story of that flood travels on its own. You are that river now, at least to some people, in some rooms. Not because you flooded on command, but because the one time it mattered, you simply didn't move the way they needed you to. Number 8. Why the ones who set it up started avoiding your eyes. There's a specific kind of discomfort that shows up on someone's face when they know they miscalculated, and they know that you know it too. It's not guilt exactly, though it borrows some of guilt's posture. It's more like exposure, the feeling of having shown your whole hand and lost anyway, in front of people who are still there to remember it. You may have noticed this in the days after that room. The same people who were so certain, so animated, so ready to lead the conversation, suddenly finding reasons not to make eye contact when you walked past. Suddenly finding somewhere else to be when the conversation turned toward what happened. That avoidance isn't randomness. It's a person trying to manage the discomfort of having been read clearly by someone they assumed they could read first. Picture two people playing a card game where one keeps insisting they know exactly what the other is holding, right up until the cards are shown, and it turns out they had it backward the entire time. There's an instinct in that moment to look away from the table, not because the cards are hard to see, but because the whole story they told themselves about the game just collapsed in front of witnesses. Why does this happen so consistently? Because most people who build a plan around provoking someone else have convinced themselves of a specific story, that they understand you better than you understand yourself. When that story fails publicly, the discomfort isn't really about you at all. It's about having to live, at least for a while, with the knowledge that their read on you, the one they were so confident in, was wrong in a way that other people saw too. There's a specific kind of avoidance that only shows up between people who used to be certain about each other and no longer are. It isn't hostility exactly, it's closer to recalibration, the awkward in-between phase where someone is quietly rebuilding their entire understanding of a person while trying not to let anyone notice they had it wrong the first time. You may have felt that awkwardness directly. Conversations that used to flow easily, suddenly needing more thought. Jokes that used to land, now landing a beat too late, or not at all, because nobody's quite sure anymore what response they're going to get. That discomfort isn't something you need to fix for them. It isn't your job to make the recalibration easier, or faster, or less embarrassing. Let the silence between you do the work that silence always eventually does. It gives people time to sit with what they got wrong, without you needing to remind them of it even once. Some lessons only land when nobody's rushing to soften them. Number 9. The still lake and the stone that never landed. Let's sit with the metaphor for a moment, because it explains more than any direct statement could. A lake that's been provoked before might ripple the second something touches its surface, every disturbance visible, every splash obvious. But a lake that has become still, deeply still, absorbs a thrown stone without the drama the thrower was expecting. The stone still falls, it still sinks, but the surface barely moves, and the person who threw it, expecting a splash big enough to be seen from the shore, is left standing there confused, holding an empty hand, watching almost nothing happen. That's what your calm was that day, not the absence of impact, the absorption of it. The stone still landed, you still heard what was said, you still felt whatever you felt underneath. But none of that reached the surface in the way they needed it to, because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a lake that ripples on command. They keep throwing stones expecting the old reaction, expecting the splash, expecting the visible disturbance they can point to and say, "See, we told you they were unstable. We told you they'd react." And every stone that lands without a ripple makes the next throw feel a little more desperate, a little more obvious, until eventually even they can see that the lake simply isn't the same lake it used to be. You might wonder if this stillness ever gets tiring to hold, if there's a cost to being the surface that doesn't move no matter what lands on it. There can be, and it's worth being honest about that. Stillness isn't the same as numbness, and it's healthy to actually process what happened rather than only performing calm for an audience. But there's a real difference between suppressing something and simply no longer needing the room to witness it. What you did in that moment wasn't suppression. It was maturity that had already done its work long before that day arrived. Consider what it actually took to become a lake that doesn't ripple on command. That kind of stillness isn't handed to anyone at birth. It's built slowly, usually through exactly the kind of moments you'd rather not have gone through. Moments where you did ripple, where the stone did make a splash, where you reacted in ways you later wished you hadn't. Every one of those earlier moments taught you something about your own depths, about what you could absorb and what you couldn't yet. And piece by piece, without a ceremony, without anyone announcing it, the water got deeper. That's worth remembering the next time you feel frustrated with an earlier version of yourself who did react, who did ripple, who gave people exactly what they were looking for. That version wasn't a failure. That version was the water still finding its own depth. The stillness you carried into that room didn't arrive out of nowhere. It arrived because every earlier splash taught you something the last one didn't, until eventually the lake simply stopped needing to move at all. Number 10. The clock that kept running out on their side of the table. Every plan built around provoking a reaction has a kind of invisible clock attached to it. It only works within a certain window. Say the line, wait for the crack, capture the reaction, move to the next phase, before the moment passes and the room moves on to something else entirely. That clock is short. It has to be. Provocation loses its power the longer it sits unanswered, because the longer nothing happens, the more obvious it becomes to everyone watching that nothing is going to happen. In that room, their clock ran out in real time, in front of everyone. Each second you didn't react was a second closer to their plan simply expiring on its own, with no dramatic ending at all, just a slow fade into irrelevance. And there is nothing more humiliating to a plan built on urgency than watching it quietly run out of time while the person it was aimed at just sits there, unaffected, waiting for whatever comes next. Picture a chess clock ticking down on only one side of the board, while the other player simply doesn't move, doesn't need to move, because the position never required a response in the first place. The ticking gets louder in the silence, more obvious, until it runs out completely, and the only thing left on that side of the board is time that was wasted. This is worth remembering the next time you feel pressure to respond quickly to something that was designed to rush you. Time is not neutral in moments like these. It belongs to whoever isn't afraid of it. You weren't afraid of the silence stretching out. They were, and that fear is what let their own clock run out before yours ever started. Think about how differently the entire moment would have unfolded if you had felt the need to fill that silence yourself. The second you rush to speak first, to explain, to defend, you hand the clock back to them. You give the moment a new deadline, one they didn't have to enforce, because you enforced it on their behalf. That's the quiet trap hidden inside almost every provocation. It only needs you to believe the silence is uncomfortable enough to end. The instant you believe that, you've restarted their timer for them, free of charge. You didn't restart it. You let the quiet stretch as long as it needed to stretch, because nothing in you was in a hurry to prove you weren't guilty of whatever they were implying. Innocence, real innocence, the kind that isn't performing for anyone, has no natural deadline. It can wait as long as the room needs it to wait, because it isn't racing against anything. That patience is the whole reason their clock ran out before yours ever started ticking. Number 11. Why calm actually beats chaos, not just that day, but structurally. There's a reason this pattern repeats itself again and again, not just in your life, but in every situation where someone tries to win through provocation instead of substance. Chaos is loud, but chaos is also fragile. It depends entirely on momentum, on keeping the other person moving fast enough that they don't have time to notice the plan has no real foundation underneath it. The moment that momentum stalls, chaos has nothing left to stand on. Calm, on the other hand, doesn't need momentum. It doesn't need the room to move at any particular speed. It can simply exist, patiently, for as long as it takes, without losing anything by waiting. That asymmetry is the whole reason calm wins so often against plans built on pressure. One side is racing against a clock. The other side isn't racing at all. Think of it like a fire compared to bedrock. Fire is dramatic, fast, consuming, impossible to ignore while it's burning. But it needs constant fuel, constant oxygen, constant movement, or it simply goes out. Bedrock needs none of that. It was there before the fire started, and it will be there after the fire runs out of anything left to burn. You weren't performing strength that day. You were simply standing on something steadier than what they were standing on. This is worth internalizing beyond that one room, beyond that one moment. Every time you feel the pull to match someone's urgency, to answer their pace instead of your own, remember what happened when you didn't. The plan that needed speed lost to the version of you that wasn't in a hurry to prove anything at all. There's a reason this dynamic repeats itself across so many different rooms, so many different years, so many different versions of the same basic conflict. Chaos has to keep reinventing itself to stay effective, because the moment people learn its patterns, its power starts to fade. It needs new triggers, new provocations, new angles, constantly, or it stops working on anyone paying attention. Calm needs none of that reinvention. It works the same way it worked yesterday, and the same way it'll work tomorrow, because it was never a trick to begin with. It's simply a way of standing that doesn't depend on anyone else's cooperation to hold steady. Think about which of those two things you'd rather build your life on top of. A strategy that has to keep changing to stay effective, always one step away from being figured out, or a foundation that doesn't need to change at all because it was never built on tricking anyone in the first place. That's not just a nicer way to move through the world. It's a structurally more durable one. And that day in that room was proof of exactly how durable it can be under real pressure. Number 12. The quiet reputation that started following you into rooms you hadn't even entered yet. Something interesting happens after a moment like this becomes known, even loosely, even through second-hand retelling. People who weren't even in that room start to hear a version of what happened, and that version starts shaping how they approach you before you've ever said a word to them. Reputation moves faster and travels further than the actual event that created it. And in this case, the reputation it created was one of unshakability. You might notice it show up in strange, small ways going forward. Conversations that used to open with testing, with small jabs disguised as jokes, start opening more carefully instead. People who like to see how far they can push before someone reacts start choosing not to push at all, because somewhere along the way, they heard that pushing on you doesn't produce the show they're looking for. Picture a house that survived a storm everyone assumed would flatten it, still standing the next morning, untouched, while the houses around it show every sign of damage. People passing by don't need an explanation for why that particular house is still standing. They just start building their expectations around the fact that it is. That's what a moment like yours does to how people approach you afterward. Not because you announced anything, because you simply remained standing when you weren't supposed to. Why does this matter beyond the satisfaction of the moment itself? Because reputation like this changes the plans people are willing to attempt against you in the future. A plan built on provoking a reaction only gets built if the planner believes the reaction is available. Once that belief disappears, so does a huge category of attempts against you, quietly, without you ever having to fight them off one at a time. It's worth pointing out that reputation like this isn't the same as intimidation, even if from a distance it can look similar. You didn't build a wall around yourself. You didn't become harder to reach or colder to talk to. What changed was narrower and more specific than that. People simply stopped believing that provoking you was a productive use of their time. That's a very different thing from becoming unapproachable. It just means the specific tactic of trying to make you react no longer shows up on anyone's list of options worth attempting. Picture a locked gate that doesn't need a guard standing in front of it, because everyone in the area already knows what happened the last time someone tried to force it open. The gate isn't hostile, it isn't threatening, it's simply understood, quietly, without needing to be tested again. That's closer to what happened here than any image of you becoming harder or colder. You didn't close yourself off. You just stopped being an easy place to start a fire. Number 13. The truth they'll never say to your face, and the one you don't need them to. Here is the part of this story that stays true whether anyone else ever admits it out loud. They will not come back to you and say they were wrong. They will not sit you down and explain that the plan failed because they misjudged your composure. That kind of admission rarely happens directly, because admitting it would mean confronting exactly how badly they misread the person standing in front of them. But you don't need that confession, chosen one. You already have something better than an admission. You have the memory of the room itself, the silence that did more work than any argument could have, the temperature that dropped, the eyes that stopped meeting yours, the plan that ran out of time while you simply waited it out without needing anything from anyone. That memory doesn't require their agreement to be true. There's a particular kind of freedom in that, one worth naming clearly before we close this out. So much of the pain that comes from moments like this originally comes from needing the other person to eventually see it, to eventually say it, to eventually hand you the apology or the acknowledgement that would make the whole thing feel resolved. And chosen one, waiting for that is its own kind of trap, because some people will never say it, not because they don't know it's true, but because saying it costs them more than staying quiet does. If your peace depends on their confession, you've handed them the last move in a game they already lost. Don't hand them that. You don't need the scoreboard read out loud to know what the score actually is. Think about everyone who has ever needed to be right in front of witnesses instead of simply being right. That need usually comes from somewhere old, somewhere that learned a long time ago that being believed mattered more than being accurate. You've done that work already. You've already separated the two. You know the difference between needing to be understood and needing to be correct. And in that room, you only needed one of those things. You already had it before you walked in. Picture the lake one more time, calm the next morning. No trace left of the stone that was thrown into it the day before. No ripple, no memory held on the surface because it was never carried there in the first place. That's not because nothing happened. It's because what happened never had the power to change what the lake actually was underneath. You are that lake. Whatever gets thrown at you from now on lands somewhere deep enough that the surface doesn't have to perform anything for anyone. Carry this forward into whatever room comes next, whatever version of that same plan someone else tries to run on you down the line, because there will likely be another one eventually. Someone else, somewhere else, will decide the fastest way to win against you is to make you loud. And now you have a memory to stand on instead of a theory. You've already seen what your stillness can do in a real room, under real pressure, against a real plan built specifically to break it. That's not something anyone can talk you out of afterward. It happened. You were there. The room was there. And the plan didn't survive contact with it. So here's where this one closes. Not loudly, not with a victory lap, just with the plain fact underneath everything you just heard. They built a plan that needed you to break. You stayed exactly where you were. And in the 3 seconds it took you to simply not give them what they came for, their entire plan ran out of road, with nowhere left to go. That wasn't luck. That wasn't an accident. That was you, quietly proving that the loudest room in the world can't shake something that already made peace with itself long before it ever walked in. If this one landed the way it was supposed to, lock it in. Like the video, subscribe for the next one. Drop 77 in the comments if you know exactly which room this reminded you of. And send this to someone who needs to hear that their calm was never the problem. It was always the part they couldn't plan around. Thanks for watching, Chosen One. We'll see you in the next one. Take care and stay steady.